Welcome everybody, those that are in the room and also to those that are online. This is hopefully the first in a series of policy dialogues that we have in what is the NTNU SINTEF Gemini Center on Global Impact.
The strategy advocates for universal normative ideals of human rights and values of Western democracy, and these are obviously very important frameworks, and these frameworks are also gaining traction in Africa's regional and national discourse of development.
I think, first of all, that it is a timely and necessary strategy. However, I find it a bit strange that we don't have an Asia strategy or a South African strategy or an Australian strategy. So it's a little bit. We can pick up on that later at least.
Completely necessary that Africa develops an energy system with low emissions if we are going to reach our climate targets. And I think this is not sufficiently reflected in this strategy. And we should support Africa to a much larger degree in developing a clean, affordable, and secure energy system for the future that will gain the entire world.
We believe that it's very important to invite Africans in to be able to describe and respond to African issues from an authentic perspective, both here in Norway as well as on the African continent, as well as in dialogue with African countries as well.
Why it is also important for us to think, to remember how these challenges are also the byproducts of history and how they are the byproducts of political economy, and also the context in which they are structurally highly circumstanced.
When it comes to the strategy, I find that it's maybe more a good overview of how Norway interacts with the African continent, but at a fairly high level, and it sets some direction, but it's not a very kind of sharp, directed strategy where it's easy to see kind of what are the actions to follow here.
It was mentioned from aid to trade, or I think we come from very or what can Norway do for Africa to we are going to what can Africa do for Norway. It seems like that is the change I see in this document, and I think in many sectors that is probably a good idea, but in healthcare it's a little bit more tricky because we trade in healthcare it will be a negative financial aspect with healthcare.
A lot of the development of this strategy is inspired by or like triggered by the change in the global scale. So there has been a lot of talk about how China is kind of like taking over the trade relations with Africa, and China doesn't have anything that has to do with aid, like development aid. It's mainly on investment, and that has kind of like informed a lot of the discussions in Europe and the United States about how the US should engage with Africa. For example, the EU has, or Europe has to engage with Africa. It has to sort of like emulate the Chinese strategy that we have to trade in sort of aid.
But we also know that these are hugely problematic frameworks, especially when they are imposed upon a continent that is so diverse. A continent that is divided and united along the lines of language and culture, and along the lines of ethnicity, and along the lines of Western laws, and sometimes also, along worldviews and philosophies of irreducible differences.
Africa is a huge and diverse continent with 54 countries, and I think that it's important to raise the question, why is stopping us from creating more regional strategies in order to create projects and policies and politics with more accuracy?
Part of the the response from Norway and from a lot of the Africa strategy in Europe, it has been to sort of, so what should we do? Should we follow the Chinese strategy or the new emerging power strategy? And that part of the strategy is to sort of like back off from the talk about human rights and democracy and all kind of like claims that we used to make before, and back to the Chinese model. So we have to engage the states. The states are kind of shifting focus to China, to Russia, to other states. So we have to engage with the states. We cannot focus on the civil society and all that kind of stuff that Norway, for example, used to push before. And that's kind of concerning if you look at it from a people perspective, from people like me.
Primarily focuses on nation state as an actor and also multinational organizations like the AU and the United Nations bodies. And these are very hierarchical, bureaucratic and top-down institutions.
Yeah, it's a strategy. It's not a plan. It's a strategy. And I, as far as I understood, there was an interview with Partey. There is no plan to make a plan out of this strategy, but which could be okay. But I think a problem, because we're talking about do we know the various contexts and how to operate, and I think that is interesting because the number of, as far as I understand, the number of embassies and diplomats, Norwegian embassies and diplomats in Africa over the last 20 years has decreased significantly.
Yeah.
And by then we are also losing our granular knowledge about the context that we operate in. And on top of that, we direct our funds to multilateral organizations, which are huge entities that we have literally no control of what happens after we have dropped that. So I think that is something which is important to discuss. Is this the direction that we want? It's not, for me, it's not a way to prioritize this. It's actually the opposite.
The question then is how to find entry points of collaboration beyond the conventional actors of development in Africa, to find ways of scaling down and scaling this locally driven, small-scale, bottom-up development initiatives in ways that align with African communities' structures and aspirations for development and change, and in ways that is not also patronizing. And to me, I think this is a significant challenge.
And I think, as I said, development has now been changed. It has to be viewed much more in a partnership, equal partnership. We have to talk together with a partner and then agree on kind of what to focus on. And then kind of take it from there.
I think it's important to recognize that when it comes to higher educational institutional collaborations, recently many African universities, a consortium of African universities and research institutions and organizations, they have developed a framework for justice-oriented academic collaboration known as the African Charter. I think this charter can also be one interesting area for us to sort of engage with because it emerges from the African continent. It is bottom-up, it is created by African universities, and it also outlines the ways in which African universities would like to collaborate with northern partners, including Norwegian institutions, and there is a scope for collaborative engagement and redefinition of what higher educational collaboration could be and look like.
On the African Union and European Union model in a way for actioning strategy. And there, what I find interesting is the linking of research, education, and innovation in one program, in one strategy. And as it stands today in Norway, and something we mentioned also in the launching of the center, there are 3 different ministries that are responsible for education collaboration, for development cooperation, and for industry and trade. So in Norway, so on the funding side of it. And if we are not able to work across these, how do we expect to have the impact which is expected to be so broad-based, even reflected in this strategy? So a linking of the funding mechanisms, or in fact the policies, I'm quite sure also, between trade, education, research, and innovation.
To get Norwegian taxpayers, citizens to engage in, like, how do we want our government to behave when it goes abroad? How do we want our business firms to behave when they go to Congo or to Sudan? I don't know, whatever they invest. So it requires a broader public engagement in a way to hold the state and the actors around the state to account on their behavior when they go abroad. So which means the Norwegian state, whether it's engaged with South Africa or Mali, has to sort of like hold the standards, the human rights and all kind of standards that would hold at home here in a way. So I think there is a need for scholars, citizens here to sort of like keep the Norwegian state to account